done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind.
Molly, what do you make of that?
I'm surprised, frankly, that she doesn't have more to say about this, given that she and her campaign know that this is one of the main questions that voters have about her. And one of the main things she's been trying to establish as part of her candidacy is the idea that she would represent a break from the past 4 years, and to not be able to come up with something to say in that moment. She continues to not be particularly nimble on her feet in a lot of these interviews, and this is a very obvious question that gave her an opportunity, frankly, to differentiate herself in a way that would have made news, that would have answered, I think, the curiosity of a lot of voters who want to know how she would lead differently. And she's not very specific in laying that out, and she can't point to a decision she would have made differently, which, in an electorate that thinks that doesn't like the way this administration has led and that doesn't like the track that the country is on, that may not be a very satisfactory answer.
I think that would be an interview, and you know what they asked her? They gave her a softball, an easy question. Really propaganda. They said, can you name a single thing where you disagree with Joe Biden? Now, let's back up for a second, because remember, Kamala Harris's entire campaign is to pretend that she hasn't been the vice president for the last 3.5 years. She stands up before crowds and she'll say, on day one, we're going to tackle the affordability crisis. On day one, we're going to secure the border. And you listen to her for 5 minutes and you think, Kamala, are you going to vote for Donald Trump? Because you've been vice president for 1,400 days. You haven't done anything. So you think after all this time of thinking about how she would do things differently from Joe Biden, she would have a well-prepared answer for the interviewers on The View. Well, they ask her one thing you would do differently from Joe Biden. You know what she says? I can't really think of anything off the top of my head. Now, in her defense, I'm not sure she could think of anything off the top of her head, whether about Joe Biden's policies or anything else, but...
All right, guys, so we got to talk about Democrats who apparently are frightened behind closed doors over the possibility of Kamala Harris losing to President Trump. And the reason why is because essentially the mainstream liberal media is saying that the race is too close to call at this point. And if anybody knows history, that is the reason why Kamala Harris and the Democrats, again, allegedly are panicking behind closed doors, because that means that the polls are probably off. Now, the question is, how off are the polls, and in what direction are they going to be off? Are they going to be off in favor of Kamala Harris, or are they going to be off in favor of Trump?
Would anyone on earth feel that these numbers would actually stick?
Okay, so I consistently say this race is too close to call. So I decided to go back through history, okay? And this, to me, says everything. How much do the state poll averages miss by, all right? The average error since 1972 in the close races in those battleground states we've been looking at, 3.4 points. 3.4 points. Every single state, all 7 of those key battleground states are within 3.4 points. What's the chance for an even larger error? We talk about the margin of error, right? So what is that 95% confidence interval? What is that true margin of error? 5% of errors in state polling averages are off by more than 9.4 points. These battleground states are well within that. I want you to remember this number, because the bottom line is this race is going to be too close to call almost certainly all the way to Election Day. It's definitely going to be within this interval, and it's most likely going to be within this interval. So the bottom line is the state polling averages tell us what it tells us is it's just a race that is too close to call. Maybe one candidate has a slight advantage over the other one, but the bottom line is it is way too close to call, and it will remain so.
Superimpose all of this really important information that you just gave us on the electoral map.
Yeah, okay. So let's say the polls are exactly right. If the polls are exactly right, Kamala Harris gets 276 electoral votes to Donald Trump's 262, because she carries those Great Lake battleground states despite losing North Carolina, Georgia, and Arizona. But let's say we have a polling miss like we had in 2020. What happens then? Well, then Donald Trump wins the election in a blowout with 312 electoral votes because he carries all these Great Lake battleground states, plus Nevada, plus the other states he was leading in, Arizona, North Carolina, and Georgia. But 2020 is just one election. What happens if we have a polling miss like 2022? Well, in that particular case, now the winner has flipped again. And Kamala Harris wins in a blowout with 319 electoral votes because she retakes those Great Lake battleground states, carries North Carolina, Georgia, and Arizona. So the bottom line here is, yes, we have those state polling averages, but the real thing they tell us is that this race is too close to call. We're probably not going to know who's going to win for another month and perhaps another month and change.
It's the Full Employment Act for senior data reporters.
You know what? I will take it. Any employment is good employment, my friend.
Thank you very much. Kate?
All right, joining us right now is the senior.
Now, President Trump personally believes, and with good reason here, history is behind Trump when it comes to the polls being off in his favor. He personally believes that the polls are going to be off in his favor, that he is currently underperforming, and on election day, he's going to overperform. This is what he told Ben Shapiro in an interview. Take a look.
She is grossly incompetent. You know, Biden was incompetent. She is equally incompetent, and in a certain way, she's more incompetent. But so I think that when you see the numbers, you may very well, Ben, see much higher numbers. You know, with a lot of people say it could be because they go out and they see signs. They see Trump signs, but every single house, all over the place. And they're saying, you know, it just doesn't feel like it's that close an election. Now, I don't know, and you always have to assume you're losing by 1 point because that's probably the best way to run. Just run right till the end. You know, I've worked about 28 days in a row. I have about 29 days left, whatever it may be, 29, and I'm not taking any days off. I just feel I would feel guilty if I took a day off. Okay, I would feel you would also. I know you your work habits are right up there, and you would too. But I do tend to poll much differently than the end result. If you remember the first one, where I was actually polled 17 points down in Wisconsin, and I won it. You remember that? That was ABC, Washington.
I do remember
Post,
that.
Two real sleazebag organizations, and they had me down 2 days before the election, 17 points, and I had just left. I had 35,000 people at a rally going crazy in Wisconsin, and then I won. And I said to a pollster, "How come I said to John McLaughlin, actually, Ben, how come they could do that? Why don't they make it 3 or 4 points? At least they save credibility." And he said, "No, 3 or 4 points, people vote. When you're 17 points down, people say, you know what, I like Trump a lot, but we're not going to vote." I said, it's that way. And I never forgot it. I was 17 points down, and I ended up winning Wisconsin 2 days later.
Yeah, so you see that, you heard that. Now, I am happy to hear that myself and President Trump kind of share the same philosophy when it comes to work, right? Every single day, President Trump is working. I work every single day. I never take a day off because when I'm not working, I feel guilty. Like, I legitimately feel depressed when I'm not working. Like, it's a weird feeling. It's almost as if I feel like I'm wasting my time, almost as if I'm wasting my life if I'm not working. And I really do feel that way, which is why I work every single day. It's actually a very, very weird thing. And I think I learned it from watching my father work literally all the time. Okay. I mean, this guy works so much overtime, and that's just what I observed growing up. And I don't know, I think I inherited it. I'm not entirely sure. It's a weird thing, right? So when Trump said that he feels guilty when he's not working, I was like, yeah, that's the exact feeling that I get when I'm not working. So again, Trump is saying, hey, I'm working overtime, like I'm down, 17 points, right, in Wisconsin, as he should be. And that's the way we all should be thinking, right? But at the same time, what people have to realize is that what the mainstream liberal media wants you to think is that, well, Trump doesn't have a chance, right? They want to discourage Trump voters from getting out there and voting. However, we have to create the exact opposite effect. We have to actually understand that there's light at the end of the tunnel. All we have to do is to execute, to over-execute, right? To vote in droves like never before in order to make sure that President Trump gets elected. Because Democrats, behind closed doors, they're frightened, right? They're afraid of the possibility of Trump becoming president. They know that Kamala Harris is weak, and her doing interviews, like, for example, the interview that she did on The View, where she basically admitted out loud that she wouldn't change anything that Joe Biden did, while at the same time taking responsibility for everything that Joe Biden did. She's going to say a bunch of stupid stuff like that, and she's going to continue to say stupid stuff like that leading up to the election. And she's basically going to ruin her chances of winning, right? I mean, she's tanking right now, okay? Her campaign is tanking. And the reason why you know this is because behind closed doors, allegedly, this is how they actually feel. So without further ado, I want to get into this video from Michael Moore, who is calling out these frightened Democrats for being concerned about Kamala Harris losing to President Trump. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Well, I honestly think we're going to have one of our largest turnouts ever. I don't think that many people are going to stay home. I certainly hope not, because of everything that's at stake. But for this happens every time with Democrats, because Democrats, they're such a frightened group of people. People, they still think that Trump is going to win. This is kind of shocking to me. Like, don't you live with people? Are you not aware that there's going to be a tsunami of women voting between now and Election Day?
Well, I mean, that's the only hope that Democrats have at this point. That and white, liberal, indoctrinated voters, right? Because those are the only group of people right now in which Kamala Harris is actually doing well with, right? Women and white, college-educated voters. I mean, again, indoctrinated voters.
Grads. Let's start with white college grads.
Let's start with white college grads, because white college grads have been this group that have been moving further and further to the left. All right, this is the Democratic margin among white college grads. Look, Hillary Clinton won him by 5 points. Then Joe Biden won him by 9. Look at this margin that Kamala Harris is pulling up in the polls right now among white college grads. It's an 18-point margin, double the margin that Joe Biden had just 4 years ago. I went back through the record books. This would be the largest win for a Democratic presidential candidate among white college grads in recorded history. That is all the way back since the early 1950s. You could probably go back even further. But the bottom line is that Kamala Harris, amongst this group, is doing ridiculously well, and is one of the main reasons that she has been able to counter Donald Trump's rising support among voters without a college degree. It's because she's doing very well among white voters with a college degree.
That's their only hope. Everybody else in this country does not indoctrinate it, that's sane, right? That's not overly emotional. They're voting for Trump, okay? But again, if you live in the real world, what you're saying is that Trump has massive support among minorities, among those who are actually normal, right? That are, regular everyday people, right? I mean, if you look at all these interviews, it doesn't matter who do the interviews on the street, right? Whether it's Don Lemon, MSNBC, ABC, CNN, okay, some, pro-Trump TikToker or whatever, pro-Biden, doesn't matter. When you actually talk to people on the street, Trump is getting an overwhelming amount of support, okay? I have not seen one of these videos where people ask other people on the street who they support, Trump versus Kamala Harris. I haven't seen one where most people are supporting Kamala Harris, because I honestly do not think there are that many supporters out there. I just don't. I'm not entirely sure how in the world do you turn around and sign up for the last 4 years of what has happened in this country. Now, again, there are some people that will do that. Again, like, for example, women, because of abortion, and white indoctrinated voters, right? They will do that, okay? But everybody else, all the same people, not so much. So, in my opinion, I think when you actually pay attention to the real world, things are looking good for Trump. But again, I am worried about the feminist wave that happened in 2022 when it comes to women voting based off this abortion nonsense. That could happen again. But my hope is that men of normal testosterone levels come out and vote in droves in a massive wave over real issues like the border and the economy. And that counteracts the feminist wave that could happen in 2024, right? I mean, the last thing that I want, what would really drive me insane, is on election night, if we actually get the final results of the election on election night, which probably is unlikely, okay? But whenever we get the final results, the Democrats, Kamala Harris ended up winning because of women. I honestly would hate that, okay? That would be a nightmare scenario that would probably drive me insane, okay? Because it would essentially solidify women taking over this country, right? Women driving our politics and driving this country off of a cliff, okay? So we cannot allow that to happen. This is why men have to step up. Men have to step up and save this country. That's what has to happen.
That they were told 2.5 years ago that they no longer control their own bodies. They no longer have a say. If they get pregnant, an unplanned pregnancy, the law now is that in many of our states that you have to have that baby, and if we have to do whatever we have to do, sort of the legal version of strapping you down to the table until you birth that baby, then so be it. That's the law of the land now. And anybody who thinks that women are going to stay home, that women are going to tolerate this and put it, do you not know any women? Do you not live with a woman? Is there a next door neighbor? Is there somebody you could just go ask them? So what do you think about my gender here? My gender. Nobody can tell me what to do with my body, and maybe some people should. I'm just saying.
Wow, what a simp, right? What a simp. If you are a man like this, don't call yourself a man, right? Please don't call yourself a man, okay? Because the federal government has been telling men what to do with their bodies for all of history, right? Men have had to sacrifice their bodies in order to fight a war to protect women, right? So I don't want to hear this nonsense about, oh, well, nobody ever tells men what to do with their bodies except fight and die in a war, again, to protect women. All these women out here talking about my body, my choice, they better hope that if Kamala Harris wins, that we don't go into World War III, okay? And a draft is instated where you have men having to go to war because all the men should say, my body, my choice. I shouldn't be forced to go fight a war. I shouldn't be forced to sacrifice my body. This is what the women told us, okay? But regardless, I find it to be rich that the people who wanted to force an experimental vaccine into people's arms are talking about my body, my choice. Again, it's just amazing how that works.
But seriously.
Okay, but Michael, let me ask you about that. Because, I mean, yes, a lot of people, obviously, they live with women. They hear the opinions. They see what women are saying in polls, but they also see what other groups are saying in polls. And Kamala Harris isn't doing as well with some voting blocks as, say, Joe Biden did before, if she wants to be comfortable, right? This appears to be very tied up. So when you look at the polls, when you look at what you're seeing in these all-important states, including Michigan, which you talk a lot about, do you not put credence in those polls that show what is a dead heat here?
I don't think it's a dead heat. I think, and I'm not saying I don't put credence in them, but I'll just go back to the morning of Election Day 2016 on the front page of the New York Times, where, according to their latest poll, said that Hillary, quote, has an 85% chance of winning today's election. Trump only has a 15% chance. That was the morning of the election. All right. No, I don't think people should be running their lives based on these polls. I think polls that are polling people on the issues are probably more accurate. But on the candidate itself, I think what I'm concerned about, I'll give you an example, because you mentioned, there are those Democrats that trying to get her to, tone it down. That's something women have been told for decades. Now you better tone that down. Yeah, that's the reason she's so progressive, because she believes in a woman's right to choose. She believes that 14-year-olds should not be able to take an AR-15 into a school, and she's going to ban these assault rifles that used to be banned. That Republicans actually used to vote in favor of the assault weapons ban 30 years ago. Now, you go down all of her positions and they line up exactly with where the majority of Americans are at. The majority of Americans believe climate change is real. The majority of Americans believe the minimum wage is too low.
Yeah, so you seen that, you heard that. Okay, so according to this guy, who's a Hollywood elitist, Democrats are panicking, okay, over the possibility of Trump winning because Kamala isn't doing that great. And this guy says, hey, don't worry about the polls too much, which I kind of agree with him on that. I don't think people should, live and die based off the polls, right? But again, if history repeats itself, then we all know that Trump is in pretty good position right now. But hey, yeah, if we got to pretend as if we're down 10, 15 points in order to motivate people to get out and to vote, then that's what we got to do, right? We just got to continue to work harder in order to finish the job, right? Sprint through the finish line. That's what we have to do. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.